Within the streets of Verona, some other brawl breaks out between the servants of the feuding noble families of Capulet and Montague. Benvolio, a Montague, attempts to forestall the fighting, but is himself embroiled, whilst the rash Capulet, Tybalt, arrives on the scene. After citizens outraged with the aid of the steady violence push back the warring factions, Prince Aeschylus, the ruler of Verona, tries to prevent any further conflicts between the households by way of decreeing dying for any individual who disturbs the peace within the destiny. Romeo, the son of Montague, runs into his cousin Benvolio, who had in advance visible Romeo moping in a grove of sycamores. After a few prodding by way of Benvolio, Romeo confides that he is in love with Rosaline, a girl who does no longer return his affections. Benvolio counsels him to overlook this woman and find every other, greater beautiful one, but Romeo remains despondent. Meanwhile, Paris, a kinsman of the prince, seeks Juliet's hand in marriage. Her father Capulet, even though happy at the healthy, asks Paris to attend years, because Juliet isn't always yet even 14. Capulet dispatches a servant with a list of human beings to invite to a masquerade and dinner party he historically holds. He invites Paris to the banquet, hoping that Paris will start to win Juliet's heart. Romeo and Benvolio, nevertheless discussing Rosaline, stumble upon a Capulet servant bearing the listing of invitations. Benvolio indicates that they attend because so as to permit Romeo to evaluate his like to other stunning girls of Verona. Romeo is of the same opinion to go along with Benvolio to the ceremonial dinner, but handiest due to the fact Rosaline, whose call he reads on the listing, will be there. In Capulet's family, young Juliet talks with her mom, woman Capulet, and her nurse approximately the opportunity of marrying Paris. Juliet is now not but considered marriage, however is of the same opinion, to observe Paris at some stage in the dinner party to look if she thinks she could fall in love with him. The banquet starts. A melancholy Romeo follows Benvolio and their witty pal Mercutio to Capulet's residence. As soon as Romeo sees Juliet from a distance and immediately falls in love with her. He forgets about Rosaline completely. As Romeo watches Juliet, entranced, a younger Capulet, Tybalt, acknowledges him and is enraged that a Montague could sneak right into a Capulet feast. He prepares to assault, but Capulet holds him lower back. Quickly, Romeo speaks to Juliet, and the two revel in a profound attraction. They kiss, not even understanding every other's names. When he reveals out from Juliet's nurse that she is the daughter of Capulet, his family's enemy, he will become distraught. While Juliet learns that the younger guy she has just kissed is the son of Montague, she grows equally disillusioned. As Mercutio and Benvolio go away the Capulet estate, Romeo leaps over the orchard wall into the garden, unable to depart Juliet in the back of. From his hiding location, he sees Juliet in a window above the orchard and hears her speak his call. He calls out to her, and they exchange vows of affection. Romeo hurries to see his friend and confessor Friar Lawrence, who, even though shocked on the unexpected turn of Romeo's heart, concurs to marry the young fans in mystery given that he sees in their love the possibility of ending the age-old feud among Capulet and Montague. The next day, Romeo and Juliet meet at Friar Lawrence's cellar and are married. The nurse, who is aware about the name of the game, procures a ladder, which Romeo will use to climb into Juliet's window for his or her wedding night time. Tomorrow, Benvolio and Mercutio come across Tybalt, Juliet's cousin, who, nevertheless enraged that Romeo attended Capulet's banquet, has challenged Romeo to a duel. Romeo appears. Now Tybalt's kinsman with the aid of marriage, Romeo begs the Capulet to maintain off the duel till he is aware why Romeo does now not need to fight. Disgusted with this plea for peace, Mercutio says that he will fight Tybalt himself. The two start to duel. Romeo tries to stop them by way of jumping between the warring parties. Tybalt stabs Mercutio under Romeo's arm, and Mercutio dies. Romeo, in a rage, kills Tybalt. Romeo flees from the scene. Soon after, the prince pronounces him for all time banished from Verona for his crime. Friar Lawrence arranges for Romeo to spend his wedding ceremony night with Juliet before he has to depart for Mantua the following morning. In her room, Juliet awaits the advent of her new husband. The nurse enters and, after a few confusion, tells Juliet that Romeo has killed Tybalt. Distraught, Juliet suddenly reveals herself married to a person who has killed her kinsman. But she resettles herself and realizes that her duty belongs together with her love to Romeo. Romeo sneaks into Juliet's room that night, and at last they consummate their marriage and their love. Morning comes, and the fanatics bid farewell, uncertain whilst they may see each other again. Juliet learns that her father, laid low with the current events, now intends for her to marry Paris in only 3 days. Uncertain of the way to continue, not able to expose to her mother and father that she is married to Romeo, but unwilling to marry Paris now that she is Romeo's wife, Juliet asks her nurse for recommendation. She counsels Juliet to proceed as if Romeo had been dead and to marry Paris, who is better in shape anyway. Disgusted with the nurse's disloyalty, Juliet disregards her recommendation and hurries to Friar Lawrence. He concocts a plan to reunite Juliet with Romeo in Mantua. The night time earlier than her wedding ceremony to Paris, Juliet needs to drink a potion so that it will make her appear like dead. After she is laid to relaxation within the family's crypt, the friar and Romeo will secretly retrieve her, and she will be loose to live with Romeo, away from their mother and father feuding. Juliet returns domestic to discover the wedding has been moved in advance in the future, and she or he is to be married the following day. That night, Juliet liquids the potion, and the nurse discovers her, reputedly dead, the next morning. The Capulets grieve, and Juliet is entombed in accordance to devise. But Friar Lawrence's message explaining the plan to Romeo never reaches Mantua. Its bearer, Friar John, receives limited to a quarantined house. Romeo hears handiest that Juliet is useless. Romeo learns handiest of Juliet's dying and comes to a decision to kill himself rather than stay without her. He buys a vial of poison from a reluctant apothecary, then speeds again to Verona to take his very own life at Juliet's tomb. Out of doors the Capulet crypt, Romeo comes upon Paris, who's scattering plant life on Juliet's grave. They combat, and Romeo kills Paris. He enters the tomb, sees Juliet's inanimate body, liquids the poison, and dies by her side. Just then, Friar Lawrence enters and realizes that Romeo has killed Paris and himself. At the equal time, Juliet awakes. Friar Lawrence hears the approaching of the watch. When Juliet refuses to go away with him, he flees by himself. Juliet sees her loved Romeo and realizes he has killed himself with poison. She kisses his poisoned lips, and whilst that doesn't kill her, buries his dagger in her chest, falling dead upon his body. The watch arrives, followed carefully by means of the prince, the Capulets, and Montague. Montague pronounces that female Montague has died of grief over Romeo's in exile. Seeing their children's bodies, Capulet and Montague conform to stop their long-status feud and to elevate gold statues of their youngster's aspect with the aid of aspect in a newly peaceful Verona.